Welcome to Culture Before Content. Culture Before Content, from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. And now, here's your host, David Duarte.
Hey, welcome to the show. Sorry for the little delay. If you're listening on audio, there was a little delay in the video. If you're not, there wasn't. All right. Anyway, welcome to the show. Welcome to today's episode of Culture Before Content. We're so excited to have you here on the Music for All podcast network. I'd also like to thank Yamaha, who is our national presenting sponsor, for their incredible and ongoing support in making this podcast possible for everyone tuning in. At Music for All and within our Culture Before Content community, our mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through music. This podcast isn't just about sharing ideas. It's a way for all of us, myself included, to grow and learn together. Each episode brings incredible voices in music education to the forefront, offering perspectives and strategies we can all benefit from. I hope these conversations inspire you, giving you practical tools and help make a meaningful difference in students' lives. I'm learning alongside with you, and I'm so grateful to be a part of this journey. So thanks for joining us on Facebook or YouTube. If you're here live, we'd love for you to jump into the conversation, ask questions, share your thoughts, interact with us in real time. If you want to watch the videos later, or if you missed the live video broadcast, no problem. You can catch the full replay immediately after the show on the platforms. Do you prefer audio? We have the podcast available to us with new episodes available every Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other major platforms as they drop every Monday. So if you need the details, just visit musicforall.org/podcast and stay connected with us. All right, let's talk a little bit about last week. Last week was amazing. We had David Adelit. He was revealed how guiding principles, a clear mission, and powerful vision can ignite and transform a music program. From empowering student leaders to creating unstoppable teamwork, we shared some insights and practical strategies that build more dynamic ensembles in a classroom with a driven culture. And I think one of the most amazing things I got out of it last week, and I actually texted him a few times this week because he really got my brain going, was that when you have a mission and vision and the kids walk into the room, you could use that as, are we living up to these dreams and goals? And I started thinking about that more and more. I had my concerts this week. Oh, and for those of you with concerts this week, good luck. But I had my concerts last week. But I was just thinking, you know, the time before the concert was definitely a time for me to really think about that mission and vision, because my ideals need to be on display, but I also need to have the students to have those same ideals. But yeah, go check out that podcast from last week. It was fascinating. All right, without any further delay, let's talk about our guest this week. We've got Caleb Rothe. Caleb Rothe is a renowned music educator and percussion expert known for leading award-winning ensembles like Pulse Percussion. He is a respected WGI adjudicator and clinician. He excels in the percussion instruction, show design, and program building, and he actually does a lot more, which we can talk about today. His commitment to fostering a collaborative and innovative culture has made him a transformative figure in the marching arts. So please welcome to the show, Caleb Rothe.
So much. Oh, I'm so happy to be joining you today.
Yay. Did I say your name correctly?
You did. You nailed it.
Oh my
Thank
gosh.
you so much.
So to our audience and our listeners, it is the most stressful thing to have people's names thrown at you. Like, it's just one of those things like, please. Anyway, welcome to the show. Why don't you, let's start with this. First off, thank you for coming. I think it's so fantastic. And by the way, it's super nice cabinet lighting in the back. I cannot say I get to shop people here. It's amazing. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because I know you're in the percussion arts, but you do many more things than that.
Sure. I end up wearing a lot of hats in the marching arts and education world. So I'll kind of run through those quickly, just so everybody's got a feel for this. The first thing is it's specific to band. I'm a band dad. So I have a son that's in high school and another that's in middle school. And so I spend a lot of time watching both of them become budding musicians and pursue their passions, which is a lot of fun. But I also get a chance to work with my son's high school marching band. So I currently in the band world am the program coordinator and music arranger for Etowanda High School, which is where he goes to school here in Southern California. And so that's what I'm currently doing. In addition to that, I am a adjudicator for bands. I judge for Music for All Bands of America. I'm a music judge there. And I'm also a judge for Drum Corps International. So I get a chance to adjudicate bands and drum corps across the country and see amazing musicians do amazing things on the field, which is a true treat. And then in addition to that, I'm heavily involved in the world of indoor percussion. I was a percussion educator for myself many moons ago before my wife and I started our family. And so I worked with a couple of programs back then. Some of the groups that the audience may have heard of are Ayala High School and Rancho Cucamonga High School, Upland High School. I was also one of the co-founders of Pulse Percussion, and that program has gone on to become, one of the top in the country at what they do. And so I've got a long background in history with that. And many years ago, when my wife and I started a family, as I mentioned, it was time for me to stop being at Monday and Wednesday night rehearsals quite so frequently and be home and be dad. But at that time, I got really involved in the administrative side of the indoor percussion activity. So I am one of the co-founders of the Southern California Percussion Alliance and currently serve as president for SCPA. That's our local percussion circuit, which we started very small, and it has grown into, I think, one of, if not the largest percussion circuits in the country. And I also serve as the percussion education coordinator for WGI. So that's a role that I love to do because it allows me to stay heavily involved in the indoor percussion activity, be kind of with the admin team there, setting the direction for the activity, and really giving back to a community and an activity that has greatly enriched my life. So wear multiple hats when it comes to indoor percussion. And I think, David, I went through all of the coaching arts things, but I have one other thing to share for your audience, just so that we're comprehensive. I am not a band director by trade. That's not what I do every day, but I am an educator. I am a teacher in the Redlands Unified School District. I taught middle school math for many, many years and was department chair and all that kind of stuff. And I am out of the classroom right now in an instructional coach role that specializes in technology integration into lessons. So that's what I do right now is I work with teachers on their instructional pedagogy and how they can take a step forward with teaching and learning with technology. And get to leverage all the great things that I've done in the world of education. So when somebody says, like, what do you do? Or, how can you quantify this? I am passionate about music. I'm passionate about technology, and I'm passionate about education. And I'm really fortunate that I kind of have a life where I get to blend all three of those things together and wear a lot of different hats. So that's it. That's my background and all the different things that I do.
Okay, that's more than a resume of things. So you hit one of my passions, which is instructional coach. I used to be a district office person, and hanging out with the ELA and the math coaches is fascinating. And one of the things, and this is probably where my first question is going to head, is I learned a lot about how to help directors through the coaching and through some of the things that, in the classroom that we all think we teach the same. And I think what I've discovered in my life is, that is totally not true. It is a snowflake of education out there. We all do our things differently, and that's kind of what this culture before content podcast has become is let's see how you do things and maybe adopt some of this in my class. But, as a math coach, I'm sure you've got all these principles and all these standards and all these things that you have to go through and teach and, and education, how it stays the same from year to year. It never changes whatsoever.
Right.
Especially math, I'm sure. But I mean, what are some insights, before we get talking on the music question, the music side of things, I'm kind of interested in like the culture of just that instructional coaching and it can be music, but what are some things that you have noticed in your life since you've kind of did a music route / education route? What are some of the similarities and what are some of the difference of the coaching?
Can you restate that one for me one more time? I just want to make sure I get the essence.
How does the instructional coaching, even for math, how does it relate to some of the things that we do in music and for you percussion as well?
Well, one of the things that you hit on that I just want to echo really quickly is that's you mentioned we all think that everybody teaches the way that we do. And man, did I believe that to my core when I was in the classroom. The bell would ring, I'd close the door and I would teach. And I just assumed everybody taught things the same way. And whether it was my math class or I also got to teach the percussion class at my middle school. So the percussion class or any of my high school walk-on coaching roles, I just kind of assumed that's the template that everybody used. And I think when I was asked to become department chair in my school district, that's when I started to realize, I spend more time in colleagues' classrooms and talk to them about their approach. You start to realize, like, not everybody does things the way that you do. So one of my favorite parts out of the classroom right now is getting a chance to be in other teachers' classrooms and see their approach. There are amazing things that they do that I would have never thought of that I can then reincorporate into my practices and use that the next time I'm working with somebody else. And I also realized that there's a lot that I've kind of honed or developed over the years that I can share with colleagues, because you may see them struggling with something in the classroom and you're like, I remember when I struggled with that too. Here's what I kind of figured out, and now I want to be able to share that with somebody else. So for me, a lot of that was honed by working with other educators in the band world, like teaching a band. You are part of a staff frequently, and so you will see many people on staff teach, and you will see them work to push and encourage students. You'll see them try to, tackle a challenge or a problem in a show or a performance or on the stage, and try to troubleshoot that with students. And so I picked up so many things from seeing all of those other folks teach. And then you realize when you step into the classroom, you can be very siloed in that environment, just kind of by nature. And so one of the things you have to work against is, how do I connect with other educators and continue to kind of sharpen my saw and continue to add tips and tricks that'll help me be successful. And so that's one of the things that I've discovered is that my professional role in my school district, connecting teachers with one another and allowing them to have conversations about, how do you approach this? How do you approach this? What are you struggling with? Does anybody ever struggled with that before? Do they have a solution for that? Is really one of the most powerful things you can do to help yourself grow in your practices. And it's as true in a math classroom as it is in a band room as well. And so those practices are consistent wherever I've been able to be an educator.
Yeah, and so I was thinking, you've got me thinking now, because a lot of people out there, I'm very envious of you to get to be basically an instructor for a marching band and not be the band director at the same time. I always told people when I do my marching band, I'm kind of the music guy. I need a visual person, I need a percussion person, and that's where my brain is going, is just thinking about the percussion side of things, and just being finding a good coach. And so, what are some of the characteristics you feel makes for a good coach? And it doesn't have to be percussion, but I mean, we could start that conversation there, because I'm thinking to myself, I'm looking for a percussion coach, and so a lot of times you find that you might find somebody who's in college, or you might find somebody who's graduated or was in something. But what do you think some of the things for you personally make for a good coach?
For specifically a music coach, somebody that I might want to add to my staff.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so,
I think the first thing is you're looking for somebody that's got a great deal of humility, and approaches that when working with students. I think one of the things when you're looking for staff members, somebody that you might want to hire to come in and coach a section of your marching band, these are frequently people that are really good on their instruments and know a whole lot about music and are super passionate about the technical aspects of playing their instrument, or visual arts or things like that. And translating that to high school musicians obviously takes a shift in mindset, because the students that you're working with don't share those same passions for you. They don't share the same experiences that you've had. And so you want somebody that is able to come in with a wealth of knowledge and then immediately bring it down to a student's level, and kind of get there in the tall grass with the students and go, how can I help these young people take a step forward? So that's the first thing. And then I think the second component, and this kind of cuts across everything, is an open-mindedness. I don't think any of us are a finished product in who we are as educators or who we are as people. And so you want somebody that comes in and says, I know a lot of things, but I'm also here to learn along with my colleagues that I'm teaching with. And also I'm here to learn from the students, because I always talked about this quite a bit. I learned as much from my students as they learned from me. And if you have that right approach when you walk into education, it's a huge game changer, whether you've got 35 years of experience in the classroom, or you're just starting out. Maybe you just you're a college student right now and you're ready to start teaching or working with some groups. That open-mindedness is a huge component.
Yeah, funny you say 35 years. I just happen to be on year 35. Just
throwing
that out there for all of that. But and also here's the neat. I think you have an extremely unique perspective. You've created things. You've started, pulse percussion. You've designed things, and always. Why do I always find that you percussionists are just great music arrangers? A lot. I swear that I don't know what you guys do, but you like this complete package of like. I keep finding percussionists who like can school people on this, but you're also a judge. You're also, and again, you have both sides. You've got the DCI side, you've got the high school marching band side, and you've got, you've just got so many different things. What are some of the difference and similarities between, like, say, DCI, BOA, WGI? What kinds of things do you notice?
They're all related to the marching arts, right? So we're all talking about young people that are trying to get really, really insanely excellent at something, and perform a really like tight and concise show. And we do that, it's not 60 minutes of literature up on a stage. It's instead 8 or 11, or, indoor percussion, maybe it's 6. But with really some of the most complex layered responsibilities placed on a performer possible, and trying to hone and refine that and basically chase perfection. The differences sometimes are just which age groups are we looking at, the relative levels of experience, and how much time do we have to rehearse and try to perfect one of those products. But I see a lot of connection and through line between all of those. And that's why, you talk to anybody that participates in multiple seasons throughout the year, and they'll say, yeah, it all feels super similar. I'm just shifting my mindset from one season's, pursuit to the next, throughout the year.
Do you have any common sense advice for those of us out there? Just thinking in terms of percussion. Those who might wanting to start a percussion ensemble and participating in the winter season. Do you have any, like, thinking just in terms of culture of an establishing a percussion program, and even those who have established programs, do you have any cultural things that you can think of that are must-haves in your world?
Yeah, I think, look, it's daunting to start something from scratch. This is true for anything that you're going to start, music education or something else. It's daunting to start something from scratch. The most important step is the first one. Like, you got to get started and you got to do something. I think for me, one of the biggest drivers is the name of this podcast that we're on right now, which is the culture has to come first before we think about what we're going to do. We got to think about what kind of environment are we going to create? What do we want this experience to feel like? What's our motivation for doing this? All of these activities that I've talked about are competitive pursuits by nature, but competition is not in my top 5 for reasons to want to do this and to be involved in it. And so I think if you're looking to start from something from scratch, you just got to start and get things going, but you got to make sure that you're really centered on your why and use that as kind of the cornerstone for everything that you do, because there's going to be 1,000 different decisions you have to make. And if you can trace them back to what's my reason for doing this, that will help kind of give you light. And then the other thing that I want to mention is connect with other people. I was shy to do this early on in my career because there's a trepidation about not wanting people to know that you don't know everything and you don't have everything figured out. And so one of the best pieces of advice I got and that I can give now is just ask other people for help, ask them for their input, run ideas off, by other people, and get that feedback. There's a wealth of knowledge out there, especially when we talk about music education. We're like, music educators are some of the most gracious, giving, helpful people that you'll ever meet. And so whether it's band or percussion or guard or whatever, ask people your questions, and most of the time they have already like worn a path through something and are more than happy to share with you their learned experience, and that will save you a lot of heartache in the long run as you go to get started on something new.
Yeah, and then it takes me to the adjudication side. So, adjudication insights provide a framework for understanding how culture and behavior influence competitive success. How can adjudication criteria be used to reinforce what we do with our groups?
For me, the adjudication criteria is central to kind of my lesson plan if I'm an educator for this year. one of the things that I always do is I try to grab all of the sheets that I'm about to be evaluated on and make sure that I know those things inside and out, because really, if we're, there's a subjective component to evaluating any form of art, but there are all sorts of criteria and considerations on there that kind of give me a roadmap for what it is I should be working on with my students, what it is I should be talking to them about, what should I be encouraging them to do. The better I understand those components, the more I can synthesize that into the precious time that I have with my students and trying to share with them, what are our priorities? What are we working on right now? How can we get a shared mindset around what success would look like? And if we can start to paint that picture early, that allows us to be targeted and kind of uniform in our efforts. And as we're doing that, we're working to fulfill the criteria that a judge might be using when they go to evaluate our product at a competition. So when I talk to young instructors and young directors, a lot of the time it's like, yeah, we're going to go to a competition, but some don't seem to take the time necessarily to grab the sheets and go over that ahead of time. And they're just kind of like flying blind and using intuition. And so I always look at it as, hey, if you really want to be successful at this, you should know what's on the test before you get to test day. And the competition is test day, and those sheets are what's on the test. So the more we know that, the more we can study ahead of time.
Oh my goodness. I think you and I could do like a music educator conference and just have this conversation right here. Hey, what's on the test? I was thinking, because you got me thinking, sorry, you've done this, but I was thinking, I talked to a lot of music educators. It's just kind of my thing. Cause I always think sometimes, what do people think makes the sheets? And I was talking to someone the other day about so many band directors get caught up in the music as being as music being the curriculum. And this goes back to my ELA experience with which it's my resource. It's not my curriculum. It's how I teach my curriculum. And then you said it's the things on the sheet. So let's talk, in terms of so you're a music judge and and I'm sure assume you're a great percussion judge. And so what are some of those criteria? Like, if you're going to show up with a group and you're going to play, in terms of music performance, what are some of those things? What are we testing? What should we be looking out for? Because I think that's what I do. By the way, I just finished judging about 100 saxophones this weekend. Like this cup of coffee here, amazing. I literally was like one after the other. And then I think to myself, what you just said, oh my gosh, if the teachers would just listen to what their students played, there would be such a success driver. Open up the ears, open up the eyes. So what are some of those music or percussion criteria that we should be testing to?
Yeah, I think when you look at the sheets, they're all going to be different and unique for the activity that you're in, but they're going to be some like through line consistent things. And it's hard to, we could do a couple hours here and I could, rattle off a bunch of criteria for you, but you want to make sure that you're looking at both the analysis sheets, that those are going to be things like ensemble cohesiveness, tone quality, intonation, rhythmic accuracy, like all of those things that are kind of binary. It's either excellent or slightly less than excellent. And to what degree might we have some hiccups or some errors in there. And then you want to look at also all of your effect criteria. And I always like to think of the effect criteria as like, okay, we have the what and the how, but the effect is kind of like why. Why did we make that choice? Why did we go down this pathway? And then also, how does this connect with the audience? Yes, it was like rhythmically precise, but did that mean anything? Did that move anybody? Did that make a connection with the listener? And so we're looking for those kinds of things. As a music educator, you're familiar with everything that's going to be on these sheets. But if you take a look at it and you crib down a couple of little notes for yourself on any one of those sheets, you're going to walk away with things that will remind you some of the stuff that maybe gets overlooked during rehearsal. So one of the ones that I love, one of my favorite criteria there is sound production. We use that in the indoor percussion world all the time. And I love it because it moves beyond quality of sound or just tone quality. And it starts to talk about this idea of it's not enough just to play in tune. It's not enough just to have the mallet strike the bar in the right location. What is the sound that we're trying to produce? And so when I think about sound production, it encompasses all of that. that I think we want to be after as music educators, as percussion educators, anybody that's standing in front of a musician trying to produce sound. That's a huge hallmark and a huge one that triggers for me a whole lot of things. That's a little reminder about, okay, rhythmic accuracy is good. I want that. I'm going to go after that. But also, what's the nature of the sound that's being produced right now? And is there a little bit of work to do to chip away and improve the fundamental sound that all of my students are making individually, and then my entire ensemble when we put everything together? So those are the kind of components that I'm like looking for and thinking about. In the effect realm, one of the ones that's a huge trigger for me is expression and communication. And I love that because, and this is applicable, it's December right now. We're about to transition away from the marching band field and get onto the stage and be in a different environment, but we're still working on the same fundamentals of music making. Man, what a great time to start thinking about not just the technical aspects that come with playing our instruments and executing what the composer has written, but what kind of expressive effort are we going to put behind this? What kind of communicative skill do we need to bring alive in this part to bring the music alive and make that connect with the audience? So all of those little things, like when your eyes trace over them and you flip it over and you look at the definition, like how is this defined? It's a little reminder for us of what can we do? What should we be working on that allow us to be even better at our craft?
Yeah, you made me think, because a lot of times I think about the directors who talk about, I've listened to my tapes, I've done everything that the judge said for me to do, but I go to this next festival, but it's not, you said it, it's not a binary, do this choice and you're going to automatically be better. You've got to have some thought process into why you're doing it. And so, like, thinking about expressive qualities, I mean, how would you, if you saw somebody, or sorry, I should say heard somebody, if you saw somebody, you wouldn't do so much, but if you heard somebody, how would you, give us an example of how you would state, you hear them play, but you want them to play with more expression. Give us an example of what you would say.
Well, I think we'd start to talk about what kind of connection are we trying to make with the audience here, and what should that music be emoting from us as a performer. I talk to my students a lot about the notes and the rhythms are written there for you, and the dynamics exist on the page. Approximately, like, we're going to start a mezzo piano and this is going to crescendo to a forte. What happens in between those? Is the crescendo going to be even all the way through, or is there a different kind of shape and a pathway to this? Or maybe it's a phrase, it starts at mezzo forte and there's not a lot of crescendo diminuendo written down into that. Does that mean the music should be totally flat during that phrase? The composer didn't put any other markings on it. And so you start to talk about, how do you interpret this? How do you bring this to life? And is music ever truly static? And I would argue and say, no, it's not. Music is about motion. It's about the science of how we're getting overtone series to ring and vibrate, and the effect that has on us as the listener. But every note that we're about to play is going to have some sort of a direction. We're always either going to be growing or decaying through anything that we do. And it's our job to think about that. That starts to become the expression. What do you want this to mean to the listener? And what kind of emphasis can we put on the phrase as we work our way through it that makes that meaningful, or more meaningful for the listener than if we had just, quantized it and played it back through a computer with a great sample library? It's going to be good sound quality, but is that going to be meaningful to us? Probably not. So that for me is the essence of expression and starting to communicate intent behind music that leaps off of the page.
Yeah, how can a band director create that culture of going beyond just what's on the page? That's where I think my brain goes, because, like, I used to think I was like this music performance guy, but then one day I realized I always had high effect scores, and it's because I wasn't thinking the process through of what effect is. I was thinking that my performance of the music was my effect and performance were equal or the same, but it took a long time for me to realize what those effects, what music affected, because I still think sometimes, even when because I do a lot of teching for judges, so, like, a lot of times I get to hear everybody's version of what effect is, and it's so fascinating. Everyone kind of says the same things different, and so what I keep coming at is, how can we as a music profession put some of that effect, how do we practice being better at it? How do we know what to do? Besides, again, you talked about networking, and what are some of those things that make effect happen in our ensembles?
Yeah, I think it starts with the sheets and becoming really familiar with the terminology on there, because when you, if you're a band director and you go to music school, many of those things are going to be innate and inherent in what you've learned, but you have not, it is not emphasized in our traditional music ed programs. We're talking more about the analytical side of what we're doing. You know what is effective, you know how to communicate, and you know how to emote. The sheets give us certain criteria for how we can talk to our students, and turn them into the ones that communicate and emote and make those connections with the audience. I think the other thing for me, effect, if we're truly talking about marching band,
Yep.
drum corps, something like that, it's 50-50 most of the time between what has been designed and constructed and then how it is being brought to life. So if you're going to look at an effect score, half of that is going to be the design team, the orchestrators, those that are planning all of the events, and how successful were they with that. And then the other half of that is going to be how well did the performers bring that to life, interpret that, and ultimately have that make a connection with the audience. The most effective things are the ones that mix those together and give you the best blend of the effect ideas and then the effect manifestation or fulfillment for the audience. So I would say start with those sheets, and then if it is if you're watching this and you're like, that's an area where I'd like to grow a whole lot. One of the things that I did, this is many moons ago when I was teaching a small little, percussion group and wanted them to be better, was I got busy after watching my competitors and trying to unpack what did they do that I thought was better than what I was doing right now. And some of that for me was orchestrational stuff. Or programming stuff where I'm like, I was really smart. I don't have anything quite that creative in my show. I got to get better at that. And then some of the time it was like, what are the performers doing that connect with the audience in a more profound way than my performers do? And what do I need to do to try to level up in that particular area? So for me, that was a lot of like, go to competitions and watch the groups that are better than me and grab a little notepad and jot down the things that I thought they're doing better than me. In this era now, with the advent of YouTube and so many performances that you can find online, I mean, you can do a whole lot of homework from the comfort of your home, where you're just looking at some of the best to do this and starting to unpack what do they do, and how can I bring that into my realm. And that is no different than any of us that have ever been working on a piece of music and have gone and listened to a professional orchestra or just an amazing collegiate wind ensemble play something and use that as inspiration for how we can up our interpretive skill, and how we can play these pieces of music even better. So anytime you've done any sort of listening assignments in the past, this is the same thing, but for your marching band or your indoor percussion group or your winter guard or whatever the case may be.
How important is it for students and directors to listen? That's a me question, actually.
I would say very important. This triggers on a whole lot of things. I think reflection is super important for any of us, wherever you are in your career, and for all of our students as well. So I think listening to your own self and your own groups and evaluating what you're doing well, strengths and weaknesses, is incredibly important, but also listening to those that are aspirational for you. Like, man, I would love my band to sound like blank, blank. I want to spend some time listening to that. I definitely want my students to spend some time listening to that. I mean, like my oldest son plays clarinet. How do you get better at clarinet? You listen to people that are even better on the instrument than you are, and then you try to figure out, well, why doesn't my tone quality sound quite like that? And what can I do that gets me a little bit closer to that? That's a huge trick. And then I will also put this back in the classroom, and in my coaching role. If I'm going to help teachers be better at their craft, one of the most important things I can do is listen to them. What are they good at? What are they not good at? And then I can also encourage them to be that kind of self-reflective person that is talking about what are they good at? What are they not good at? Are you listening to your students and what's working for them and not working for them? Or do they have a voice in how you structure your class and your assignments, and the way that you're going to connect with them and help bring the content alive in class? All of those things are super important. So listening, I think, is gosh, just such an essential skill for all of us.
Oh my gosh, you keep saying all these things, and my brain's going a million miles an hour here. So like, and I'm going to keep saying this. And whoever and there was an instructional coach for gifted, and I brought this up before, but she made this amazing statement that said learning takes place in reflection. And so that statement stuck with me so hard from that moment forward that I spend my time, like, reflection has to happen. And so one of the things I talk about, especially in my own instruction, is stop giving the answers to my students and try to pull it out of them so that I know the answer, but I don't want to just, hey, that's a B flat. Why did I stop? What's going on here? How can we make this more, as you say, how can we make this more expressive? Because sometimes I think, and you can give your opinion on this one, sometimes I think teacher voice gets in the way of student voice for the sake of trying to make the music better.
Oh my gosh, you are, it's like you're reading from my cheat sheet of things that
I'm trying my hardest. I'm just
bag. So classroom for a second. Most of our classrooms, coast to coast, feature way too much teacher talk and not nearly enough student talk. And the sooner we as educators can embrace that, I don't care what you teach, the sooner we can embrace that, the faster we're going to be able to help change and make more student-centered learning environments, which is a huge passion point for me and what I think education needs to look like. One of the best pieces of advice I got, and this is back when I was in a math classroom, was be less helpful, which, man, just really, really is tough as an educator, because you're like, my job here is to help students. My help is getting in the way of them having authentic discovery on their own. My help is getting in the way of productive struggle for them. Every time I ride in with the answer, I've robbed them of the chance to like work on it a little bit until they have their own breakthrough. And so I got way more effective as an educator when I tried to balance teacher talk and student talk. I'm not saying we don't have a role. Teachers are going to talk. You have to. You have the knowledge and the experience. But turn more of your class into questions for your students than answers for them to copy down into notes. And I would say that's as true in the music classroom as it is anywhere else. The best bands that I know are the ones that have very active student leaders in their group, and have a lot of responsibility placed on the students and lead with a lot of questions. When we're done with a rep of something and we stop, one of the best things you can do before you start to give corrective information to the group is ask them what they heard. Hey, what did we just do well? And what was not so great? What do we need to do differently next time? Hearing that from your students is eye-opening, because now you're starting to hear how they're processing things, what they think is going well and not going well, and where they think errors lie. And sometimes you and your students are not on the same page. You were about to correct X, Y, and Z, and they talked about A, B, and C. That's a chance for me as an educator to go like, okay, those two things aren't connected. They don't always have to be, but what can I do that tries to blend those things together just a little bit more? What can I do that tries to help us get on the same page? What are maybe some messages I haven't been delivering that I could be delivering to my students right now?
Well, contrary to that, I also want to add this. Sometimes you ask the question, and because I don't think I ever say anything to my students. I think I'm just like, I think my superpower is I'm the Riddler. And so like sometimes you ask the question expecting this obvious answer, and sometimes the kids give out genius. And it changes your whole rehearsal. Like it's something you weren't like. I had a student correct me the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's even better. And I hadn't thought of it from this. So sometimes in student reflection and just trying to pull things out, you get some of that in your teaching and your feedback. And so like, this is my other thing too, is like, cause you said this is earlier, but it's the difference between qualitative and quantitative. Cause I think sometimes we as music educators are always looking for the quantitative answers. You said the binary, give me the answer, give me the especially on the sheets, give me the answer so I can fix it. Give me the answers that I can fix it. And so much of it is qualitative, it is hard to put into a shell. How do you balance, the difference between, or how do you interpret the difference between quantitative and qualitative?
So I would say you need both, and I do a lot of this in my role in my school district with data. Like I'm a big data nerd and
Oh,
have a lot
that's
of
my favorite
responsibilities
word.
in that realm. And so I'm a big proponent of both of those things. If we're trying to measure something, we need both quantitative data and qualitative data, because there are things that you can measure quantitatively that absolutely matter. You definitely need metrics, and there are things that we need to be able to collect and determine in that way. But that's not going to tell a whole picture on anything. And so you also need qualitative data where we're trying to figure out in kind of like a anecdotal way or short response or open-ended question and things like that. What other components can I not measure with a multiple choice tool or a fill in the blank or something like that that's going to typically have right or wrong answers, or maybe select all the apply, that kind of stuff. There are going to be other things that have nuance and subtlety. One of the things I need to know is feelings, and feelings are super hard to quantify, and are much better as a qualitative metric. And so, if you're a music educator, you're going to be dealing with both of these things, right? We're going to take attendance and figure out who is here and who is not. We're going to make sure that we're doing check-in tests, going down the line sometimes, and I'm going to check off who is doing this proficiently, who is not doing this proficiently, and where are they on this scale. But I'm also looking for all sorts of data that would be hard for me to quantify, and I'm looking for individual insight and more summary-based information, because ultimately we're trying to help students on a journey that they're on, and that journey is not always quantifiable. It's going to be qualitative as well.
Yeah, it's my dreamland that my students understand everything that I say in the classroom and that they're just doing all the right things. So, I always think there are some things when you're leading a group. There's the classroom, there's the music that you select. But how can we, in our day-to-day responsibilities? I was thinking about, again, I think I'm enamored with the fact that you're a math coach. I didn't know that, audience. I think that's I find it, because how many times have you walked into a classroom and really it's not like, this is where culture before content started, by the way. There's so many times that I used to go into classrooms and teachers would be saying all the right things, doing all the right things, but their culture wasn't in place, their classroom. How many times have you observed classroom management as one of the big problems with why they're not reaching the kids?
It's very widespread, and it's super important. And I don't know that we as teachers pause, especially secondary teachers. I mean, my elementary teachers, I think, are pretty strong at this. Secondary teachers, we could do a whole lot more by pausing our content for a second and thinking about the culture. What is it that we're trying to establish in this room right now? What do we want this learning environment to be like? What do we want the relationship between my students and I to be? There's a phrase that's been kicking around for a long time. My friend Terry Sanders is the one that always says this. The students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that one has always really, really resonated with me, where, like, if I'm going to be an educator, this is whether I'm teaching a drumline or I'm standing in front of a math classroom or I'm presenting professional development to a bunch of my colleagues. Before I get to the content, there's a component where they have to know who I am and what makes me tick and why I care for my audience and the people that I'm about to work with. And there's an authenticity to that is so incredibly important. There's a connection that has to be established if they're going to be willing to come along on this journey. In education, a lot of the time, our clients are not interested in whatever it is that we're selling, and we have to sell it anyway. And so one of the most important jobs that we have is making that sales pitch up front and getting them to buy in on whatever our vision is to come along for the journey. All the content for me comes afterwards. So if I've got all sorts of great learning activities, my content game is really, really high. One of the things, like, that's not going to matter unless I get that buy-in from my students ahead of time. And so that's where I think the culture becomes so important and something that we have to establish early on. And for me, when I've talked about this in the past, it really comes down to who you are as a person, and your authenticity. I mentioned that before, your vulnerability with people, and how clearly you can illustrate for them that you care and you're invested in them beyond just what's in it for you. The moment you're able to show those people why you're here for them, what your motivations are for them, how you want to help and influence and improve outcomes for them, the easier it is to get them to buy into, okay, now let's take out your notebooks, open up to this page. Everybody grab your music folders, pull out this piece. We're going to rehearse this first. That's such an important step. And look, we're all super busy people that don't have as many hours to teach as we would like. It's so easy to pull the content card out first. But I think we're all better served by thinking culture first and then letting the content flow afterwards.
So let's talk a little Caleb for a second. So
Sure.
let's go to Etowanda. So let's go. What are some of your cultural things? What does it look like for you to be an instructor? Like, what are some of your must-haves? What does your culture look like? What does your rehearsal look like? What are some of the things that, again, let's go coaching route. We see Caleb teaching. What are some of the things that are so important? Here's the hard part, because some of it's probably so ingrained you don't think of it anymore in those terms. That's what I've learned about myself. I sometimes have got so much in place, I've forgotten what I'm doing, but it's important. So tell us a little bit about what Caleb's must-haves are when you teach.
Sure. And I want to start and preface this with a whole bunch of stuff. The band director at Etowanda, her name is Susie Marin, and she does a phenomenal job. Yeah. Shout out to Susie. She's great. And as a dad, I couldn't possibly wish for a better band director for my kids. At that program, the culture starts with her. It's her mindset. It's the way that she works with students. It's her goals, her vision, and what dynamic she wants the band to have. And so all of that flows from her. I'm in a very fortunate position now where I don't have any single responsibilities for any of the sections there. A long time ago, I was the front ensemble guy, and like that was my section, and I had to shepherd all those students along, and I was the primary educator for them all the time. At Etowanda, there's somebody that handles that for all the sections and all the staff. And I'm now at this point getting to play a really interesting role without any particular individual students to work with, but instead kind of working with the whole staff on putting together a program and refining it and trying to get the whole band to be the best we can possibly make it. So I think it really starts at that program, the same way that it did for all of my programs that I got to teach, with thinking about the program as a family. And that starts at Etowanda, that starts with Susie, and that is her mindset and the way that she approaches setting up that program. You establish a place where kids feel connected to everybody else there, and feel that sense of love, feel that sense of camaraderie, and feel like that is their place where they fit in the world. And that is, it's so easy to say that, and it's quite another thing to do that. I will say, in my experience, the work doing that is what you're going to do day in and day out, whether you're having a good day or a bad day, whether you're happy with the band or you're a little disappointed in how things are going that day. It is all about creating that environment where every single person there knows that they're loved and cared for and are appreciated for being there. But then also there are high standards and high expectations, and we're all going to work really hard together after a common goal. And we're going to be exhausted and we're going to be drained, but we're doing it with the rest of our family, and that makes it okay.
Yeah, I'm going to back up here for a second. I don't think you said anything that has to do with a musical technique, there was not one thing that came out of your mouth that had to do with the music, any of that. And that's why I asked the question, because I want to discover, again, culture before content. And yes, the content is super important. It's not about that, but it's so I ask what culture has to be in place for Caleb. So let's change the question up. You're coming to visit my school. You're coming to meet my percussionist for the first time. It's mostly freshmen, throwing that out there. So what are your thoughts? What, if you're planning, and all I've told you is I've got mostly freshmen, and then I've got, some of my kids have been there for 2 years. I'm giving you the real accurate things here. I lost most of my seniors last year because I had a large senior class. So it's mostly new kids. We've come a long way. Can you come help me? And so what are some of those cultural things that you're in I'm going to go help David with his group. What are some of those cultures that are going to be in place when you come to clinic?
Yeah. If this is an ongoing relationship, I'm not just going to come by once,
right.
but kind of on a regular basis. The first thing I want to do is I want to get to know all of the students, and I want to get them to know me. So our first time together is probably not going to be a whole lot of music making, especially, or at least right out of the gate. We're going to do, I hate icebreaker activities. I never do those and call them that, but I want to spend some time getting to know each other, and getting a chance to talk with each other. And so we just might start with some questions like, tell me one interesting thing about yourself. Tell me something you're really passionate about outside of here. Why did you join? Why are you here? What do you want to get out of this experience? Those kinds of questions open the door to who people are in kind of like a non-confrontational way, because you can just give whatever your authentic answer is to that. And then I want to talk to them a little bit about me and who I am and why I'm there today and what my goals are. And so then we might take that, and then we might start to pivot that towards some goals. What do you want to accomplish? What are you trying to get out of this? We want to be the best percussion program in the state. Okay, great. Let's talk about what it would take to do that. Or maybe it's not even a group goal; it's just an individual goal. Hey, I'm a freshman, but the snare drum caught my eye, and I really want to play that. Well, great. Let's talk about some of the things that we might need to do to get you from where you are right now to that. What are some of the habits and the practices that you might need to invest in regularly? And can we come up with a plan that will get you from A to Z? How does that sound to you? Do you think you can do this? So like student buy-in is an incredibly important component in that. And student directed and student driven goals and objectives are a super important part. So for me, it kind of starts with that. What are our goals? After that, I want them to get to know me, and I want to make sure that it is a fun, engaging environment for them to be a part of. It's 2024 right now. It's about to turn over to 2025. In music education, our competition right now is the plethora of entertainment and easy access gaming systems and all sorts of things that students like that have access to all the time. And so one of our most important objectives is how do we make what we're doing as appealing to them as those other options, or hopefully more appealing to them. And so that's a big part of this, is what makes them tick, why are they here, and can I turn this into a place where they want to come back for more tomorrow? If I can do that, David, like in rehearsal one, if we can have a good time together and we can play some music and I can be super energetic and passionate, and I'm kind of a crazy person when I'm teaching. So if we walk out of that and they're like, this was dynamic and fun and full of passion during this rehearsrsal, and they want to come back the next time, then mission accomplished for the first day. And if I can start to get that to be a pattern, like if that's what we are able to accomplish in the first day, then the second rehearsal, we can dive in even more on how we get technically better at our pursuit and our instruments and what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, what's fascinating me about this conversation today is it is completely not focused on the musical skill sets, it has not been the musical. It really truly has been focused on those cultural things that we do. And like, you have so many hats. I love the fact that you're a parent. I love the adjudicator side. I love it all, because, I always say this, we evolved to who we are 35 years in. And so we didn't start out this way. I still remember being young, and I'm sure you do, just starting out trying to say, hi, I think this comes to this. I want to be a part of a greater good. And it's that collaborative effort. And why this show has been super fun for me, at least, that the collaboration side has been amazing. And I learned, and it's really unique to hear how everyone's perception, when we talk about the culture, starts to drive in between relationships, reflection, best common practice, all those things. And, here's my final question for today, which is, how important is it for a director or even students to go watch another program and go learn from, and it doesn't have to be the best program. It could just be a program. How important is it for us to go learn from others?
It's incredibly important. I mean, that's the heart of learning, right? Anything that we have ever learned is in service of somebody that came before us and had that knowledge to share. And so some of that is going to be traditional instruction. Some of that is going to be experiential learning and knowledge construction. The way that we learn is by taking things that others have done. So in the performing arts, one of the most valuable things that we could do. I mean, we're going to get great instruction from our director or instructor that's standing in front of us, but going out and seeing other groups that pursue the same thing that you do is one of the best ways that you can grow in your own sensibility and artistic understanding and interpretation of what it is, what it means to be a musician or to be an artist or to be a performer. Seeing others do that craft enriches what you do. Even if it's not like, the number one program in the country, it's one that, maybe they're not even as strong as the program that you're from. Seeing other people perform and communicate and bring music to life changes you, and is a huge benefit for all of us as educators, as learners. All of us benefit from watching others pursue the same kind of craft that we pursue.
I can actually identify my cultural shift in education to a moment. It was Hart High School in 2005, and I just heard them warm up, and I couldn't understand what I was watching because everything I had about was all on the execution side, the technical side, and I just had so much emotion and music. I heard bands differently, literally from that day forward. And I will always talk about how that shift changed my course of history by simply just watching and learning. So here goes. I cannot believe we have been going for 55 minutes because I was honestly looking, I was like, oh my goodness, how can this be? Because again, thank you so much for what you've been talking about. That's really amazing. But here goes. Let's finalize by what's Caleb's version of culture, or your final thought on what culture is for our audience.
For me, culture is about the community that you create. As an educator, I'm big into our community of learners. And so whether that's my math classroom or that's somebody else's classroom, I'm coming in to do a technology demo lesson, or it's in your band hall. I think culture really begins with, what is that community? And central to that, I think, is a sense of belonging. I think that's what all of our students are looking for when they decide to go into music and they decide to continue pursuing this after, learning the basics on an instrument. Something about it that draws them to it. And it's not usually the instrument itself. It's this feeling like you found your people and you found your space and you found one thing that you love doing. And so I think culture for me is really about that community and fostering a sense of belonging. I think once you're able to kind of crack that nut, everything else flows from there. And you can start to talk about, this culture of excellence or a culture of growth somewhere, or the tradition that a program has, or a culture of innovation. All of those things start to flow once you get everybody that wants to be a part of whatever that experience is that you're offering. So for me, the experience is a huge piece of it, and kind of the place to start.
Well, I want to thank you for the most fascinating conversation today. And again, I just fascinate that we really spent more time talking about what makes a sense of belonging, and that's how things evolve, and that culture. So Caleb, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's been my pleasure, David. This has been a blast. I too can't believe that we've been going, 57 minutes.
I'm ready to get started.
I know. This is great. So I had a blast talking to you about this stuff. And I get the sense you and I could keep going another 3 hours.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, Caleb.
My pleasure.
All right. I cannot believe how fast that went. Well, it's almost time for winter break. And we want to thank Music for All for their incredible support, and Yamaha for being our national presenting sponsor, making culture before content possible. And I want to give a special shout out to my fantastic team, Patrick, Ben, Laura, and John, for your dedication and your culture behind the scenes, which makes this show possible for all of us. And to my audience, if you missed any of the last 40 episodes, now's the perfect time to catch up. We're all getting ready to go on a break. Explore all the incredible insights and stories we've shared by listening. You can listen on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. Watch them on YouTube, and when we've shifted to Facebook. And if you have any questions, you can just go to musicforall.org/podcast. As for me, if you would like to connect with me, feel free to email me at david.duarte@me.com. I've had that email for a very, very long time. All right. Well, we will return on January 5th with more inspiring conversations and ideas to start the new year. And finally, please take this time to recharge, reflect, and enjoy the wonderful holiday season and have a happy holiday and a very fun new year. And I will see you soon on Culture Before Content.
Hey,